He's retired from the New York Police Department. He's an author. He's an activist for law enforcement officers. He's here to talk about his career in the NYPD, in particular, the events surrounding the terror attack on 9/11. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. What is the Newsbreak app, and why should you follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app? Newsbreak is your number one local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Calling us from the New York City area, we have retired NYPD Officer David Chianese on the Law Enforcement. David, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
You know what? I've been working on this since March of 2017, trying to get you on the show. Whether you knew it or not, this is a guy I've been trying to get on the show for over 2 years, and somehow it just kind of all fell into place.
Sorry to hear that. I wish I would have. I wish I would have known sooner.
Well,
and,
you're a busy
great
guy.
To finally be here.
You're a busy guy. I'm a busy guy, and that just happens that way. For those who don't know, David is retired NYPD. We'll talk about that a bit. He's also an author. We'll talk about that. He's done a lot of activist work for law enforcement officers. We'll talk a little bit about that, but mainly we're going to talk about his career in NYPD, and particularly the events surrounding 9/11. First of all, bird's eye view, David, how long were you on the job?
I was on the job just over 16 years before I was sidelined with a line-of-duty injury.
Well, thank you for your service. I know what that's like. Mine was like 12 years, and all of a sudden, one day, it was over, and I wasn't expecting to be over.
No, same here. Had no intention on being over, didn't want it to be over, but unfortunately, I guess as it may be, God had bigger plans.
Sometimes that's the way it works, and I don't know about you, but did it take a while to find your new normal, your new mission in life after you retired?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was definite when it showed itself, but it took a while to get there, and it was a rough road until it happened. But, you know, God definitely revealed his plans for me and set things in motion. Before
we go into details, because it was the anniversary of 9/11 not that long ago, and this is a sensitive subject for lots of people, not just people in law enforcement or firefighters, but for all. I don't care what agency you worked at. It's a very emotional topic, and for most Americans, I know, it's that way. But before we get into the details of that, you've written a book. Tell us a little bit about the book and where people can get more information about it.
Okay. I have a book in the works, but the book I recently released, it's a police officer's safety guide in troubled times. And what had happened is it came to me after the recent firing and recent controversy behind the firing of our police commissioner with the Garnered case had terminated. Again, I don't know your listeners how well they know, but we had the Garnered case where the media went on a rampage saying the officer had chokehold and put the defendant in a chokehold, which wasn't the case if you followed it. But unfortunately, this young officer, Palianto, he was terminated.
Right.
Long story short, they caved to political pressure, fired this kid. Now, this kid had beat civil cases. This kid had beat Department of Justice investigations, the criminal charge from the DA, beat it all, no charges pressed, everything was good. The department felt he needed to be terminated. It is what it is. There were calls from union bosses at that time, all different ranks, saying, hey, we got to shut this down, which, listen, you know the deal. Bosses are big to say that, but when push comes to shove, they don't want to deal with the consequence. They don't follow through. I was always a big fan. There was a couple of incidents when I was with the NYPD of things that had happened, whether it be no contracts or, again, something similar to someone being fired or an officer being killed, where union bosses did the same thing. We're going to slow down. We're going to shut them down. We're going to show them who's boss. We're going to get our rights back. again, I just think the bosses don't have what it takes to do it. They don't have the courage, the intestinal fortitude, and they certainly, under the Taylor Act, don't want to go to jail. That being said, it didn't take long to come to me that our patrol guide that we have that we're governed by, our department policies and procedures are actually perfect tools to doing just this. Shutting down the police department, doing it 100% legally, 100% correct, and giving it back to them and letting them know that we mean business. So what I did is I outlined in the book ways in which officers could do this as a way to fight back. Now, the idea and the whole principle of doing it is not hurting the people you serve. We're charged to protect them. We've taken an oath, and we have to do that. But you have a lot of guys on the job who forget that when they're chasing a perp and they twist their ankle, well, they won't go to the hospital, get checked out, get taken off the clock for the day. They'll suck it up, deal with it, and go to continue doing what they do. What the book highlights, and again, it's sarcasm. It was a way for me to vent, and a lot of guys who have read it gave the feedback that they loved it because, again, it was how they felt. There was humor to it. They knew where I was coming from, and they saw how it could work, and it brought things to light for them. But the idea was is if we followed their own procedures, the city would not operate.
Exactly.
So
and that's not just a New York thing. That's everywhere. If every officer across the United States did everything exactly by the book, followed every rule and regulation and procedure, they'd handle about 3 calls a day. And you think the backlog is bad now?
Exactly.
And so you cannot do everything by the book. Sounds great in theory, but in reality, it doesn't work.
That's correct. But
and
again,
even in this case,
book is also what will be thrown at us every time something doesn't go right. Which, again, like you said, nothing goes right. I mean, I don't care what job you're in. You can be a maid in a hotel. You could be a chef at a fancy restaurant. Something's going to go wrong. You're going to be short linens. You're going to be short eggs. You got to improvise and do what you got to do. Now, granted, when you're cops, firefighters, first responders of any sort, and even military, sometimes those missing eggs end up costing lives. But it is the damage that comes along with the job. And it's unfortunate. It's tragic, but it happens. Doesn't mean that it's wrong, that the officer did anything wrong. A lot of times, again, like in the Gardner case, these are events that unfolded based on the actions of the defendant. I always say life is like a choose-your-own-adventure. This gentleman made a lot of unfortunate decisions in the course of that day, several of them involving the police, that at any given point he had just stopped and did the complete opposite of what he actually did, he'd probably be alive today and with his family.
Absolutely. And what's the old saying is the police really don't have control over the outcome. It's totally in the suspect, defendant, perpetrator's hands. They decide how far this is going to go. Exactly.
And so, again, it was that incident really that got me to say, hey, I'm going to throw this out there. Because even though our union bosses do say, hey, guys, do everything by the book, they've never actually sat down and explained to the officers what exactly is by the book. You have a fender bender pulling up to a hot job to cause scuffed bumpers. According to our procedure, just because it's scuffed bumpers doesn't matter. Both cars have to be taken out of service.
Right.
And if it happens on a midnight, you got to wait till our central repair shop is back open. The next weekday at 8 o'clock in the morning, you've taken 2 cars completely out of service.
And that's the way it is across the United States.
Guys don't realize.
And people really want to get into this. That's a New York thing. It's not a New York thing. It's a Baltimore thing. It's a Philly thing. It's a Chicago, Los Angeles. It doesn't matter. And if the officer, let's just say you have a slight fender bender with another patrol car on the way to a hot call and you disregard policies and procedures and continue on, you could wind up being fired. You could wind up being suspended without pay and your family not having insurance for an extended period of time while you're waiting charges. It can go on and on and on. And we're not making excuses here. Before we get wrapped up in this conversation more, where can people get more details about that book?
Well, they can. It's available through Amazon Kindle, and again, the name of the book is A Police Officer's Safety Guide in Troubled Times. Or they can just put in the search bar with Amazon my first and last name, which is David, and the last name is spelled Chianese, and it'll be the first thing that pops up on this search.
On that note, we're going to take a short break. We are talking with David Chianese, retired NYPD. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. If you want to be a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk radio show, simply contact us. It couldn't be easier. You can send us a message on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk radio show page, or email jay@letradio.com. That's JAY@letradio.com. Back to our conversation with retired NYPD David Chianese on the Law Enforcement Show. David, first of all, thank you for clarifying how to pronounce your last name. Ever since I used to watch The Sopranos years ago, I never got that last name right. There was an actor with the same last name, Dominic Chianese.
Yes, that's correct. Good old Dominic.
And I think he was Uncle Junior, to be honest with you. I'm not certain.
Yes, yeah, the character was Uncle Junior. That's correct, absolutely.
Oh, what a character he was. There's something about that. Hollywood loves to dramatize police, especially police in Jersey, New York City, Brooklyn, wherever it might be, a certain way. And they do the same thing with other groups, with the Italians, with the Irish, and there's always a negative stereotype. You got to take that stuff with a grain of salt, folks. For those who aren't aware, we're going to talk a little bit about what life is really like. For example, you were in the NYPD for 16 years before you retired. And
that's correct.
During your career, you handled everything. Like most cops I know, you handle them from soup to nuts. Crazy people, emotionally disturbed people. The only thing I didn't handle that came close to was delivering a baby, and that was one of my biggest fears.
We did. Partner and I did when I was in Brooklyn, and well, we really didn't actually. The mom pretty much did it all herself. It literally was. It was kind of a catch. It was scoop them up in your jacket and wait for EMS to get there.
That's
luckily in New York City, though.
I was scared to death of that. That's the one thing that had me more petrified than anything else I ever handled.
You know. You know what? It was. There was nothing to it. It was just. It was. I got to be honest with you. It was kind of amazing. You couldn't even. You can't really put it into words. Again, but for me in New York, I think my toughest. I've always had calls that I said would be, oh, that was my roughest, that was my toughest, and I had a few. I had one in early 2001, actually mid 2001, about Father's Day with the Father's Day fire. And then, of course, I just pretty much got back to work when September 11th happened, and that was pretty much my big thing.
That was a big deal for a lot of people. And we've lost a lot of people. We lost a lot of people that day, a lot of police, a lot of fire, and we've lost many more since then due to 9/11 related cancers. Yes, absolutely. Cancers, neurological issues, both civilian and law enforcement and firefighters as well. Before we get into the details of that day, I'll tell you a little story. Many years ago, before they had the new site, it's still construction. There was a big hole. I was there on business for other things, and they had a couple NYPD guys out there, and I went up to them, and I identified myself as a retired police sergeant from Baltimore, and I just wanted to say that I couldn't imagine, but I got like 2 words out and burst out in tears. To this day, I find it very difficult to even begin to comprehend the amount of devastation. I'm not talking about the buildings. I'm talking about the loss of life. To have that many people perish in one day, I don't know where you begin with that. I got to be honest with you. I have no idea myself. It's surreal. It really is, and every anniversary brings it back. You see it, and again, knowing exactly where I was and everything that's happened since then, just cannot wrap my brain around it. But I also have, I always say to myself, having a hard time. I have a hard time dealing with a lot of the conspiracy nuts that are out there. I'm glad you brought that up. I get very aggravated and very angry at them. Oh yeah, absolutely, and you argue with them. And I've done it, and I'm like, dude, there were no planes. It was no planes. I'm like, we were there, dude. Like, heard it, saw it, felt it, there. And then they're like, no, you're part of the conspiracy, which I've heard from some crazy, really crazy nuts. But the other thing I do have to say about it, which it blows my mind, when we always used to joke around about it in the squad room, but it was legit.
we would have people call us to tell us that they knew of a small group, 2 or 3 people, let's say, trying to hit a jewelry store. Just 2 or 3 months they're going to hit a jewelry store. We would get tips to it. It was 2 or 3 people and a jewelry store. You had all these people planning this for years, and not one single tip came in.
And the whole conspiracy theory, what I always say is, there's an old saying that a lot of organized crime groups say, is that 3 people can keep a secret if 2 are dead. So everybody they talk to, the thousands of people that have to be involved in this conspiracy theory, some of the people at the beginning would say no. And some of them would say, not only am I not okay with this, I'm going to blow the whistle. But none of that occurred because there was no conspiracy theory.
There wasn't. Which is part of it's what I try to get to people. They say it. And it is amazing that nothing came out, just for the mere people that were involved. But this was not, like you said, it wasn't a conspiracy theory, but it actually was a well-oiled machine. There was military precision to it to a degree. This is what they do. And, it's like how we used guerrilla warfare against the British back during the Revolutionary War, and they were unable to prepare for it. This was our shot. This was their guerrilla warfare against us. We were not prepared for this. Our history, for the most part, is going to war against organized militaries.
Right.
Not this. They basically threw, our Lexington and Concord right back at us with modern day technology. And again, which is why we've been really good to adapting to it and stopping another one from happening, because it is only a matter of time. But the old saying that they only have to get it once and we have to be 100% right, we picked up quick on that learning curve. And so far, we've been lucky and pretty much 100% right.
Another thing that springs to mind that a lot of people don't seem to realize, maybe they got it, on September 12th and 13th and 14th and for a few months afterwards, but they seem to have lost it, is that our law enforcement is our first line of defense against foreign attack, whether it be military or terrorist subversive groups, doesn't matter. It takes forever to scramble the military. And so it's our local law enforcement. I don't know who they think is coming. I love the Navy SEALs. I love the Marine Corps. They're not equipped to handle invasions right away in the United States. That's where your local police are involved and your state police.
Absolutely. And like you said, unfortunately, there's a majority of, let me rephrase that. I don't think there's a majority, but there certainly is a minority that's very vocal in how it shouldn't be us to do it. Our tactics are infringing on their freedoms or whatnot. But that freedom that's being infringed upon them is what's preventing them from ending up on one of the numerous "Have you seen me" posters that were all over Lower Manhattan after the World Trade Center was struck.
I remember them, yeah. They were literally everywhere.
With your bag search going into a subway. But if these people had actually ever seen the damage that was done in the tubes in London when they did that attack in their transit system, it's devastating. And if a bag search holds you up 30 seconds to a minute but keeps everyone safe, hey, it is what it is. I can tell you right now, if the cops find a little bit of weed or something on you, it's not what they're looking for. They may not notice it. They're just looking for wires, batteries, stuff like that that's going to tip them off to a bigger problem. People just got to get their act together and start getting on board, or unfortunately something drastic is going to happen.
And the name has changed, the game has changed dramatically for local law enforcement. With 9/11, which was not the first terror attack on the World Trade Center, we had the Boston Marathon bombing. We just recently had the guy putting the pressure cooker type deals in the subways in New York. And you know who's handling this, ladies and gentlemen? It's street cops. And when I say street cop, I mean that with utmost respect. And we'll talk about that more. We are talking with David Chianese, retired NYPD. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and be sure to click like. Back to our conversation with David Chianese, retired NYPD. I believe retired the rank of detective. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
See, you guys, it's a little bit different from where I was. A police officer and detective were pretty much the same rank, just different job descriptions. In New York, it's a different rank. So before I forget, thank you for your service. And that's what I'm trying to get better at saying. And to be honest with you, when people say it to me, I never quite know what to say, and I stumble and bumble through it. I'm trying to get better and just say thank you, but thank you very much for your service. Or I'll say you're welcome.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you for your service, and you're welcome. It was a pleasure to serve everybody. You know, I think it's just in the nature of the calling for what we do.
And that's a great way of putting it. Personally, I was giving serious thought to being a priest first, and then realized that wasn't for me, and police work was. And like you, my career was ended due to line of duty injury. But one of the things we talked about, and this is something I don't think people really quite comprehend, the days of the 50s and the 60s where police were uneducated are gone. They're long, long gone and have been for a long time. You take a normal, everyday street cop, even a rookie out of the academy, they got to be able to handle terrorism threats, medical emergencies, know whether to administer Narcan, deliver baby, and they got to be able to do all of it quickly and make a decision like in 30 seconds.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's just the basics. You know, how about the fact that they have to come up with decisions based on case law or potential future case law that might take a learned judge 8 months to figure out? Reality is you got to do it in under a minute.
Yeah, for a whole lot less money they make, and it's a whole lot more dangerous. Right,
exactly. And again, remember the judges and the DAs, they all have their protections from lawsuits and everything else, but you as an officer, you're on the hook, and you got to think fast, and you better be 100% right.
And they think that, when I say they, politicians and news media, groups like that, activist groups, are working very diligently to try to erode even further what protections law enforcement officers have from civil liability, which isn't much to begin with.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's payday for them. You know, let's be honest. Most attorneys, or I should say most politicians are attorneys. And most of them are not coming from the side of the DA. They're coming from the other side, the dark side of the law, if you will, the ambulance chasers and whatnot. So for them to partner with, their cohorts in the advocacy groups that are out there, the anti-police group, the BLM movements, and the Antifa movements, to handicap us, also really, not only does it help push their agenda, but it really also helps them to expand their net worth in the lawsuits against us.
That's what it's all about, money. The very first thing that happened with us in Baltimore, and I'm sure it happened with you guys, because I had other people on from NYPD, especially more narcotics. We take a gun off a guy, a substantial amount of narcotics for felony distribution, and the very first thing they would do, the defense attorney says, make a complaint against the officers for excessive force and discourtesy. And nothing ever happened to him, even though it was proven to be totally unfounded.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? It's a topic maybe for another show, but it brings up a good point, too, with these dangerous new red flag laws they want to pull up. You know, a lot of our officers out there, you're going to have officers that are put in danger trying to retrieve these firearms from people. But how many of these criminals are now going to turn around these dirtbags and start filing complaints anonymously against officers to get officers jammed up or pulled off the street for a couple of weeks, get them pulled or yanked out of their detail? Just a complete disaster.
And there we go. That's the thing about, you got to be very, very careful nowadays in law enforcement. The old rule of thumb was you go home alive, and you go home in relatively the same physical condition you were before you got there. And we try to do the same with mental and emotional, but quite honestly failed on that part. I don't know if anybody does his career for long enough doesn't get seriously dinged up.
Oh, absolutely. And again, like you said, psychologically or physically, you do take a beating. You absolutely take a beating. It's the nature of the job, and I think that's why you really gotta love it. You know, it only takes a few years, I believe, for the job to weed out those that are just in this to hold them over. People who couldn't find value in their college degree and just needed something to pay off the debt and took the job, they don't last too long. If they do, they probably end up, making boss and sitting behind a desk somewhere and second-guessing everything we do. But the reality is I think most of them get pushed out.
And I believe you are 100% correct. After about 5 years, there's a filtration process. Those who really want to be there stay. Those who don't will be forced out. And be honest with you, the shady guys, they tend to get forced out very, very quickly. that's another Hollywood myth, at least in Baltimore. Shady, corrupt police, no one wanted them around.
No, it doesn't. And although there may be, there's a lot of people that say, well, if they're dirty, people won't talk. A dirty cop gets cops killed, and a dirty cop people are going to talk about. People are going to get it out there. It may not be done in a way where the public sees it, but within the department itself, word gets around. People know. People stay clear, and the department itself usually gets most of them. I mean, yeah. A few get through, but remember, there's over 1 million of us in the nation. How many times do you hear this? Hear this in the news a year? 5, 6, 8.
Very rarely, percentage-wise, but when I talk to people who are not in law enforcement, they make it sound like it's every other guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Complete departments. I mean, listen, you're in Baltimore. I'm NYPD. Look at LAPD. They're all corrupt. If you ask anyone, they're all corrupt. Same with Miami. There are no good cops. They're all dirty. Obviously not the case.
Obviously, yeah.
These are people we're never going to win over. The battle to right the ship, turn things around, improve morale. Those people that feel that way, we will never win. I like to not even waste my time with them. They start with that and say, all right, we're done. I can't sway you. I'm not going to try.
There's an old saying that
I give it a shot.
Yeah, I think Mark Twain said it, that never argue with an idiot because they'll just drag you down to their own level and beat you with experience. So to a point, I believe you're correct, but and I'm wondering how you feel about this. I really think the news media and the entertainment media, Hollywood in particular, have a lot to do with shaping the opinion that all police are horrible.
Oh, absolutely. When I first started getting into advocacy, it was because of the media. The organization I had started at the time, LESMA, stood for Law Enforcement and Supporters for Media Accountability. That's what it was all about. It was actually started after a reporter, Whitfield, at a CNN. She made a comment in regards to an individual who attacked, I believe it was a Houston Police Department police station with pipe bombs and with snipers shooting out the windows. She called the individual a hero for standing up for a cause he believed in, even though it was attacking the police. And it was at that moment that I'm like, you know what, I'm sick of this. I'm done. I have a voice. I can speak. You can't hurt me. You can't take my pension. The hell with this. We're going to get the right story out there. The media's always been horrible. From day one, it's the theory that bad news sells headlines. Headlines sell. They can drive up the profits on their marketing, and therefore make money. It's all about lining the pockets. You will hear a good story when a cop dies because guess what? That sells news too.
Right.
But when you hear the other good stories about how, again, today in New York, a police officer shot in the hand, 4 officers jumped on and wrestled an armed assailant who was abusing his wife. It'll get its 30 seconds in news.
That's right. It'll be buried. The old saying they had in Baltimore is if it bleeds, it leads. And by the way, anti-police, it bleeds. And that draws a lot of eyeballs, whether it be for newspapers, for radio news, for television news. It doesn't matter. It draws a lot of attention, and a lot of attention means sales, especially nowadays with newspapers losing their distribution in droves due to the internet. Yep. We're talking with David Chianese. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Remember when news was free? Be sure to check out the Newsbreak app. It's free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events. Free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. That's the free Newsbreak app. Be sure to look for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast. But one of the reasons we have the Law Enforcement Show is that we want to provide a platform for law enforcement officers in particular, other first responders, survivors, and even victims of crime that aren't in law enforcement to tell their stories, because news media does a horrible job And one of my favorite examples is you have a case where an officer's been shot and is in horrible condition, has catastrophic lifelong injuries, and they'll say the good news is the injuries are not life-threatening, and they move on. And they never talk about what that officer has to go through, what his family or her family had to go through. They never bring those things up, and they don't talk about the impact it has not just on the immediate family, but their neighbors and their co-workers and the community as a whole.
Absolutely. It's sickening. And again, it's time and time again. Officers, we're only a headline that's worth it when we're dead. That's all they care about. Other than that, like you said, you're lucky enough to live, you'll get your pension, you'll go home. It's the after effects that always get you that they don't care about. And of course, once you're gone, the department forgets about you. And, it just creates a whole bunch of problems.
Boy, you on target with the department forgetting about you. That's like overnight. It's like turning off the light switch when you close the door for a room. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah, they instantaneously. And I get it, too. There were a lot of cops I worked with and helped that were having depression issues after leaving the job. And one of the biggest things they said was, my own guys I worked with have forgotten about me. They don't come in to check in on me. They don't call, they don't this, they don't that. And I would tell each and every one of them, yeah, exactly. Because you're not on the job anymore. You're free of the burden of the job. They're still dealing with it. You're now gone and forgetting about getting your chops busted over. Like for us in the squad, why do you have 30 open cases? I don't like the way you closed this case. One PP wants your case folder for CompStat. How come you didn't put a picture in that folder? How come you did 28 DD5s, investigative reports on that one case? You should have done 40. Why did it take you 7 days to do a follow-up? Or 7 days and 3 minutes. You were supposed to have it done in exactly 7 days. And it's nonsense. I understand it's their political stuff and their administrative stuff they got to deal with. But you're free of it now. These guys are still living it. It's not that I don't love you. It's not that I don't think about you. But let's be honest, they just ain't got the time.
And they also tend to think that, hey, you're in the rocking chair, you're going fishing every day, and life is good for you. You got the reward, and all the bad stuff's over. But getting back to the conversation 9/11 and the article you wrote, and we're going to have you back again to talk about this because I believe you got a book coming out about it. Those things don't leave you. No. It's every, you just mentioning it too, and I'm tearing up a little bit. That's okay. You don't have to talk about it now. I'm just going to tell people those things don't leave you. And when we say, and you hear people say this, and I have a lot of military brothers and sisters, combat veterans, a lot of police officers, a lot of firefighters, corrections officers, and even our dispatchers say, I wish my mind could forget some of the things I've seen and some of the things I had to go through, and they don't. Yeah. And if you're really lucky, you begin to understand the impact on you. And if you're really fortunate, you have a spouse who understands that, hey, you're not the same cat you were when you were 19. Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. It's taken a little work, as you said, both for myself and my wife and even my kids. But it's hard. It's every day. Anything brings it up. Even now. I was working when it all happened, and I wasn't down at ground zero when the planes collapsed. Not planes collapsed, when the buildings collapsed and when the second plane hit. I was working in my command, and there's security procedures we had to take. There's sensitive locations that were in my command that had to be protected based on the fact that if they didn't, it would have made the World Trade Center look like a joke, and no one knew what was going to happen. So we had facilities we had to secure that would have devastated the city if they got hit. My first shift there was the following morning, 4 a.m., delivered on a city bus, a whole bunch of us, and sent out there. And seeing this war zone, the fires raging, the smoke, the acres literally of flesh and debris, small debris. I mean, there were no office chairs, like I wrote in that article. Literally no office chairs. Entire building and not one chair makes it, It was just devastating to see it and working on the pile and seeing the bucket brigades and smelling it and doing security posts and everything else down there in months and months to come.
it blows your mind, and it does give you an unbelievable feeling of survivor guilt. And it's not survivor guilt in the sense of like I was there and could have grabbed somebody, or guys I know who were there and saw somebody running to them as they're reaching to pull them in under a van or a fire engine, and all of a sudden the smoke catches up to them, the person disappears and is gone, pulverized by debris. It's just being there and knowing you're part of the NYPD. You were out there every day doing your job, busting your butt for the city. Was there a clue out there that you missed? Was there something out there? The stories that came out afterwards about houses going empty, mail stacking up, families gone, not jokes. It was legit. Yeah. It was in the command I worked in. Mosques emptying out and people celebrating happened in my command. I can tell you now, and recently it was reported, Kerrig had mentioned it was legit. We had it in the city. Trump talked about reports of it in Jersey, which was confirmed. There were reports, right? The Democrats will tell you it never happened. I can tell you firsthand we've seen it. It is the guilt you have knowing that you were doing this work and that this had happened, and wondering whether or not, at least for me, was there something that was overlooked? Was there anything that might have changed, you might have done that changed it? That car that blew through the stop sign that you didn't stop could have very well led to something preventing this. And you do get an overwhelming, when you have pride for your job, your city, your department, and you have absolute love of your country, and this happens, you feel it. There's a possible, scenario in which something might have came out of it, and you just wonder, is it something I missed?
Yeah.
And it's day in and day out. And literally, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I can smell the pile. It's like the weirdest thing, like even to today. Or here in the middle of the night, I'll hear the whistle blow. And I'll just, they would blow the whistle if they thought one of the other buildings was coming down or anything along those lines, or a large piece of rubble was going to come crashing down. They'd blow the whistle. You can hear it. In the middle of your sleep, it wakes you up, or you hear the machines churning and dumping steel in the middle of the night. And it just doesn't, like, people are like, oh, never forget, and I agree, never forget, and I'll do everything I can so people remember. But I would also do, like you said, I would do anything I could so that for just a year I could have peace and forget it.
One of the things that people ask me, if you go back in time, would you do anything different? And as far as police work goes, there's maybe one call I wouldn't have gone to. But other than that, and even though I know about me now, I still would have gone because that's what we did. And it's not like we had a lot of choice.
No, you know what? And again, it's true. I wouldn't have given anything. I wouldn't have changed anything I've ever done. The only thing I might have changed, realistically, and it's stupid. It's stupid to say, but the only thing I could say I would have changed. One thing I could have changed, and one thing I wish would have changed. The one thing I would have changed is I wish I would have actually gotten down there and maybe been able to be that extra guy to pull a few extra bodies out that day. But I had a lieutenant at the time. I was literally just back from a Father's Day fire. That was obviously earlier that same year, where a building blew up and killed 3 firefighters, and I got injured digging through the debris to pull them out. So I was out for a while, and it was amazing. I go out on that line of duty for a building, and as soon as I come back, I'm back because of a building. And he's like, you know what? Maybe it's an omen you're staying back.
Maybe it's from one horror scene to another.
Right. But you know what? The reality is he might have saved my life. Who the hell knows? But there's part of me, again, with the guilt that still wonders, like, is someone dead because maybe I should have been there to pull them out?
I hear you. And we're going to have to talk about this again, David, because the whole survivor's guilt, none of it makes sense. We all know it's not logical. We know it's not rational, but it does make it easier to deal with. There's so many conversations that you and I can have. I appreciate you spending time with us today on the Law Enforcement Show, and I really cannot wait to have you back again in the future. Thanks so very much.
Oh, thanks for having me. Can't wait to come back.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk radio show. The Law Enforcement Talk radio show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.